Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're literally becoming historical detectives. We're going to decode the lost linguistic links between ancient spiritual traditions and the absolute freedom to pursue empirical truth. Because, as it turns out, much of what we think we know about this supposed conflict between religion and science, well, it's actually based on a massive historical misunderstanding.
So let me hook you right out of the gate with a question that pretty much defines our modern worldview. Does having faith inherently mean you have to shut off your brain and just ignore objective facts? I mean, in our contemporary culture, we almost take it for granted that being a believer means forcefully rejecting evidence in favor of some strict, dogmatic rules.
You see, we live in a world that artificially pits facts against faith. But when you actually start uncovering original translations and looking closely at ancient philosophical frameworks, it reveals a completely different reality. The truth is, early spiritual traditions weren't about blind obedience at all. They were actually engines of logical inquiry.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're hitting 1. The illusion of blind belief. 2. When belief meant loyalty. 3. Sraddha, which is trust pending investigation. 4. Pramana, or the architecture of proof. 5. Shastras, covering tradition driving innovation. And finally, 6. Reclaiming the ancient mindset. Let's get into it.
All right, starting right off with Section 1, the illusion of blind belief.
Take a look at the cognitive dissonance between our sterilized modern assumption of faith and the incredibly vibrant investigative reality of the ancient world. Today, we kind of treat faith as just holding an opinion about an unproven fact, right? But in the ancient world, it was this dynamic integration of logic and spiritual contemplation. You didn't just passively accept a claim, you were expected to actively investigate it.
Moving right along to Section 2, when belief meant loyalty.
To really ground all this, we're looking at the monumental scholarship of comparative religion expert Wilfred Cantwell-Smith. He meticulously traced religious terms across languages. We're talking Swedish, Arabic, Latin, Sanskrit, and he uncovered this radical semantic mutation. Smith realized that when we read ancient texts with our modern lens, we completely misinterpret what the original author actually meant. So in early history, believing didn't mean ignoring facts. Actually, the English word belief comes from roots meaning to hold dear or to beloved. It's parallel to the Latin credo, which meant to pledge your heart. Think about it like a wedding vow. When you say I do, you aren't stating a scientific, verifiable fact about the future, right? You're making an active existential commitment to a path.
Now, this timeline perfectly illustrates a massive historical theft of meaning. We move from classical antiquity, where faith was this ancient vow of trust, to the post-Reformation period, which turned it into these rigid, factual propositions. And then finally we arrive at today's modern secular era, which just dismisses faith entirely as unscientific. The words stayed exactly the same, but the entire operating system underneath it completely flipped.
Which brings us to Section 3, sraddha, or trust pending investigation. Rather than blind submission to dogma, the ancient Vedic concept of sraddha literally translates to placing the heart upon. It is absolutely not credulity. Instead, it represents a temporary hypothesis. It's an intelligent, provisional trust that you hold on to until you can test the teaching for yourself. It's really just an attitude of openness that stops immediate, paralyzing skepticism in its tracks. I absolutely love this analogy from the Vedanta tradition. Look, when you go to a doctor, you don't demand to earn a medical degree before taking the medicine they give you, do you? No, you exercise sraddha. You suspend your doubt just long enough to see if the prescription actually works. And once the cure works, you don't need faith anymore because you have direct, undeniable experience.
Okay, let's look at how they actually tested this in Section 4, Pramana, the architecture of proof.
So, neither the orthodox nor heterodox ancient Indian schools relied on blind faith to understand reality. They relied on pramana. This was a rigorous, highly methodological approach to discovering truth. We're talking about the ancient science of epistemology, defining exactly how we know what we know and exactly how we prove it.
This ancient system brilliantly breaks the act of knowing down into 3 logical steps. You've got the pramatar, which is the knower, the prameya, the object being studied, and the pramana, the active process of actually proving it. It's kind of like a scientist, the bacteria they're studying, and the microscope. This framework leaves zero room for willful ignorance. It absolutely demands verifiable methods.
Now, this is the part that completely blows my mind. Check out this hierarchy. Ancient Eastern traditions explicitly ranked your own direct perception, pratyaksha, and your logical inference, anumana, above the authority of Scripture when dealing with the physical world. Let that sink in. Scripture wasn't allowed to override your own senses. Its validity was strictly subordinated to empirical, verifiable facts.
All right, Section 5, Shastras, tradition driving innovation. So far from demanding rigid adherence, the Shastras practically mandated innovation. For example, the Mimamsa Shastra explicitly states that a discourse is incomplete unless it contains apurva, which means a completely novel, untold principle. The Vedas themselves actually say they're just a ladder to reach higher truths, insisting that ancient tradition always has to be balanced with personal insight and brand new discoveries.
There's this quote from the Rig Veda that just beautifully sums this up. The ancient architects of these traditions didn't want a closed, dogmatic loop. No way. They were actively looking outward. They operated almost like an open-source software community, constantly welcoming new discoveries, fresh ideas, and shifting paradigms from literally anywhere in the world.
And if you want the ultimate script flipper, here it is from the 8th century philosopher Adi Shankara. He famously declared that if scripture contradicts an obvious empirical reality, like, say, a text claiming that fire is cool, the scripture loses all its authority. You don't just abandon your common sense to believe in cold fire, you abandon the literal misinterpretation of the text. Reason and experience always win out.
Which brings us to our final part, Section 6, Reclaiming the Ancient Mindset.
When you put these two frameworks side by side, the historical divergence is just staring you in the face. Ancient Eastern and non-Abrahamic systems prioritized active, logical pursuit and behavioral transformation way over blindly accepting dogmatic creeds. It was entirely about what you did, how you tested it, and the empirical verification of your own transformation, not just nodding along to unproven facts.
So I'm going to leave you with this final thought to ponder. If we restore the true meaning of faith as trust pending investigation, and we combine that with rigorous logic, how much more could we discover about our universe and, honestly, about ourselves? We really don't have to choose between faith and facts, because when they're properly understood, they're simply two sides of the exact same pursuit of truth.